sometimes the peace and happiness that we want from life is waiting at the other end of, I guess, our perception. I think that sometimes we get so hyper fixated within our own thoughts, within our own mind, within our own problems, that we cease to actually be in the moment. We cease to actually be able to experience what is. I think, we shouldn't let our minds rest anywhere but to keep flowing. And what I think I mean by that is not necessarily saying don't let your mind rest or don't let your mind, I guess, relax, but to say our hyperfixation on certain points and certain narratives is unbefitting for us. I think that, of course, we need to acknowledge when a certain thing is negative and acknowledge what we can do to solve it. We'll acknowledge this and the other, but any other thought beyond that, any other thought that I feel like is not constructive or perpetuates some type of negative idea onto you, I think should not be given into. I think that, positive and negative are at times choices that we just make about what we see in the world. And I think in a real way, we're living in either our own personal heaven or our own personal hell, depending on our situations and our perspective of our situation. And I think the importance isn't necessarily to cater your situation, but to cater your perspective. I feel like a lot of what we experience is sort of guided by the perspective that we have on the world and the perspective that we have on ourselves. I think if we can learn to implement a little bit more positivity in ourselves in regards to our perspective, in regards to actually making the choice to embrace positivity and to embrace love in a way, we're sort of allowing so much stuff to come into our lives, so much stuff worth appreciation. And that's not necessarily to say that it just automatically attracts into your life, I don't think. It's more so like we weren't able to perceive it. You're not able to truly see what you're, I guess, not opening your eyes to. And I think we get so preoccupied with negativity and preoccupied with ourselves and the whole idea of how do I relate to this and what should I be doing here and what does this mean for me and what does this mean for my life and what is this saying about my path. And a lot of the answers are right in front of us. But I feel like they can only be truly seen if we allow ourselves to be present. And if we allow ourselves to be in the moment and not so caught up in some of the fictitious nonsense that we're feeding ourselves at times. I think we're conditioned to think a certain way. We're conditioned to look at things a certain way. And it, takes sort of an individual perspective or at least giving yourself a chance to rein your own thoughts sometimes, to see some of the beauty that's around you. I think a lot of times beauty is not embraced in mundane things. It's not embraced in things that we see regularly. It's not embraced in familiarity. And I think we need to learn how to embrace it in familiarity because if we can't embrace beauty in the familiarity we see outside, then how are we going to embrace it within ourselves? You see yourself every day. And I think a lot of us feel like we're getting used to ourselves, but there's constantly new things. There's constantly progression. I think every day is new and you're new with every day. Every experience makes you new. I feel like we have to recognize how much each and every choice we make aligns us with certain ideas and aligns us with ourselves in a way, or a version of ourselves that maybe is better or it's this is that and the other. But it's always about the choice that we make. I think it always is going to tend towards whatever we feed ourselves. It's going to become what we give to the world, what we express. And I think our expression causes people and circumstances to act in certain ways. And if we express ourselves in a way that's negative or has hints of our own insecurity and worry and doubt, then it's probably going to be representative of that. That's why I feel like it's not necessarily important to embrace a delusion, but embrace a faith in self that's characteristic of what you hope to achieve in the future. I think the doubt that we have is sort of misplaced because we don't know exactly what's going to happen. And a lot of the times the answers that we want are right in front of us. Not necessarily in a sense that they're just plain as day, but they're within us. I think they're always here, and I think we always steadily know what we want and what's best for us in a lot of scenarios. And I think what gets in the way sometimes is our attachment to the past or attachment to our habitual nature and patterns and the way that we've continued to act and not giving ourselves an opportunity to sort of be new and embrace some type of new experience. And I think the greatest new experience to embrace is the present moment, not necessarily through what you're doing, but through who you are. I think once you give yourself that sort of audience and sort of stop being a distant observer to your life, but an active participant, that's where the flow part comes in. It's like not letting your mind rest on some singular subject and hyperfixate on the negativity or positivity of some situation. Like If you're already good, then it's about becoming better. And if you already have good things, it's about still continuing to be grateful for the good that is continuing to come. Not necessarily saying don't acknowledge or don't appreciate things in the past, but to say appreciate everything wholly. And that includes mostly a moment, because we have to appreciate it while it's here. Otherwise, we're just appreciating some type of memory. And I think in setting up that relationship with yourself is sort of setting you up to not actually enjoy the moment, but to enjoy the labels and connotations that we place on the things that we do. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, I caught myself doing this the other day. Last video, I talked about how I had a speaking event, and I did it. It went very well. But after the event, I was still like, dang, I could have done better. It was my first time, though. I could have done better here, there. And it's not even like I had a specific stuff I could have done better. It was just a subtle choice that I was making in my head that I didn't do sufficient for myself when I did. And it's about the labeling aspect. Like, if I just think about it from my perspective now, I'm like, ooh, I spoke. That's good. That's amazing. You know that, and I can have that relationship with it. But in the moment, I was not feeling like that, and I had to tell myself to actually appreciate what it was that I was doing, so I actually can experience life for what it is and have that happiness and have that gratitude for myself for the work that I put in for here, this, that, and the other, and it motivated me to keep going and doing other stuff. And I think part of the reason that we lose motivation is familiarity with the self, familiarity with our goals, familiarity with our actions. We get so caught up in thinking that this has to do this and this means this, that by this means this, I mean our actions leading to certain outcomes. And when they don't align with that, I think we punish ourselves as if the only reason that it could mistakenly go a different way is if we ourselves are not right for it, or if we aren't deserving, or if we aren't this. And I think the labels we place on ourselves are the most important things, because it completely dictates the way you think about yourself. And I think the way we think about ourselves needs to be based in a sort of, not necessarily a positivity, but an openness, a willingness to allow it to be expressed so you can actually see the parts of yourself that seek out change and the parts of yourself that you haven't seen before, I guess. And it allows you to keep flowing as you continue to appreciate the moment, because it's about not about, disregarding things you've appreciated in the past, but recognizing there's so much left to appreciate. Each moment needs to be appreciated where it is so you can continue to move forward and be in the moment in a way. And I think that's what is characteristic of the moment. I think that's sort of the joy and happiness that letting go sort of brings you. Is not necessarily the items or whatever type of manifestation idea you may be having, but more so your ability to be grateful for what is here. Be happy for what you're looking at. Be happy for who's looking at it, and appreciating the perspective you have on the world. That's part of what I talked about in the speech I gave, but just the whole idea of learning to love your own perspective. We all have our differences, and it's important to not necessarily be offended by the differences other people have, in both good and bad. I think we have to allow everyone to exist fully to allow ourselves to exist fully. I think our participation in certain negative connotations that we place on other people or we experience in terms of our feelings is sort of unbefitting. Like, why are we punishing ourselves for the way that someone is? Why are we punishing ourselves for the way that the world is? I think we need to learn how to treat ourselves like a friend, not necessarily in just our actions to ourselves, but on the perspective that we choose to have on certain things. I don't think you can call it delusion, you can call it this, is that, and other. I think negativity, of course, has to be acknowledged in an honest way. But I think when it comes to actually how we traverse and walk through our life, we have to continue to implement positivity, continue to love ourselves, and continue to love ourselves enough to feel certain amounts of pain, to feel whatever feeling that we need to feel so it can pass. I think our disregard of our feelings somewhat attaches it to the memory to the extent of it being something that we look back at and re-experience. Like, there's plenty of negative experiences in my past that I used to think about and used to loop over and over again, and it engraved into my character in ways that I did not know that they would. I was sort of being naive with what I was feeding myself, what I was consuming. And I think it's important to recognize that what you consume and what you feed yourself is very important. Not necessarily just in terms of a physical sense, but the positivity and negativity you give to yourself on a regular basis. I think if we can't embrace any type of love, positivity, affection, etc., 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 with ourselves, then everything sort of loses its tinge, its point, because it becomes solely about outcomes, solely about what we're doing, solely about what that produces, instead of the person producing it, instead of, the whole connection and network that we have with people as humans. And, we sort of put ourselves on this conditional love spectrum. We force ourselves to love ourselves according to this, that, and the other, or appreciate ourselves according to this, that, and the other. Like, we can't give ourselves the necessary amount of faith and validation that we actually need to be us, unless some type of grand thing happens or some type of achievement. But even when those achievements come, if you're not able to validate yourself by virtue of being you, then it's not going to really matter. Because then you're just going to be trying to be focused on maintaining that certain something that's keeping your ego up, keeping your identity up, rather than grounding yourself where you are and recognizing that nothing can sort of change that. Nothing in the external sense should be able to change that, because your internal world is not external. They both coincide with each other and they reflect each other in a lot of ways. But we have to recognize that dispositions in the external world are somewhat caused by our internal struggles and internal perspectives. Like, if I'm negative inside and I'm feeling that and I'm perpetuating that feeling and it's ingrained into my character, ingrained into what I see in the world and what I think is going to happen for me, and then whenever something bad happens, it's going to feel terrible. Like, I'll be transparent. Somebody hit my vehicle the other day. Hit and run. I have to pay for that now. But when it happened, I chose not to let that be a reason to punish myself. Like, there's no reason for me to get overzealously negative about something that, one, I couldn't control, and one, I have the power to change in a certain way. Yes, I have to spend money. Money's supposed to be spent anyway. It's about having a certain perspective that accommodates you and allows you to keep flowing. If I hark on, certain negative aspects of that and stay stuck in the past and stay stuck in that experience, then I'm not going to be actually able to change anything for the better, to go get my stuff fixed, to go, set that stuff up and do it in a way that's not demeaning what else I have to do. It's not just about looking at that certain thing in a negative way, but recognizing how a single negative perspective of something encompassing you spreads to everything else that you do. It spreads to the attitudes that you have on people and places all around. So the importance is, in my opinion, is to sort of ground yourself where you are and get back to the present moment so you can choose. I think a lot of life is about the choices that we make, and recognizing that a lot of the feelings we have and attitudes are just double-edged swords. Anxiety and excitement are the same chemical, and it's really about the perspectives that we take on the actions that we're doing. Like, I get nervous sometimes, I get anxious sometimes when I have to do stuff in a very expressive way. But the thing that's helped me a lot is one, bringing people on stage with me. Not treating it like I'm talking at people, treating it like I'm talking to people, treating it like I'm talking, instead of, oh, how am I going to be perceived? I have to make sure that they like this. I have to make sure that this is another. All overzealous thought. And I think that's what is part of that mind resting aspect. Our mind is rested in an area that doesn't allow it to actually rest. It's rested as in it's stagnant. It's stuck on a certain idea, and it's continuing to explore that negativity and spread it into my character because I'm not checking it. I don't think a lot of us realize the power that we have over our thoughts and the power we have over our attitudes. And it's just about the discipline that we can have. And of course, certain experiences and certain things, of course, are important to feel. I think you need to feel your feelings. I think you need to acknowledge them in order to heal them. But I think after the acknowledged and felt, I think to truly let it go is to recognize that how you felt is how you felt, period. But it's not who you are. It's not what you are. And looking at yourself from a standpoint of that individuality and that confidence and integrity, I think allows a lot more action to take place that's actually befitting of who you are in terms of your thoughts about yourself. It allows you to exercise so much more self-love, regardless of the situations that you get in. And it allows you to sort of, through that self-love, continue to move towards things that are better. So if you made it this far in the video, Thank you very much. I do appreciate you guys. I hope you're taking care of yourself. I hope you're doing what you can, what you have, and continuing to BP. All in all, thank you. A lot more on the way. I'm on the bender. We doing a video every day for 25 days in terms of the recording schedule.